Hi there, I'm Jennifer Tryon, and I'm going to show you how to make this super chic little circular bag using the circle bag dies from Gemini. So for this project, I'm going to need my Gemini machine and the circular crossover bag dies. There's 3 dies in this set. One that's going to make the circle front and back, one that's going to make the zip panels, and one that's going to make the gusset. That's the bottom part of the circle. The zip panel is the top part of the circle where your zipper goes. So I'm also going to use fabric. I need an outer and a lining fabric, plus I need to use some stabilizer, sturdy stabilizer, one that's going to allow that circle to hold its shape even when you're carrying it. So make sure your stabilizer is nice and stiff. I like to use an iron-on one. I'm also going to use some of the Threaders faux leather for my strap. I'm going to measure out a bit of zipper from Threaders Zips on a Roll. I'm also going to use 2 D-rings. I'm using the brass ones from Threaders, and that's going to help me have a nice professional look as I attach my strap to the main part of my bag. So I'm first going to start with my main fabric, and I'm going to subcut just the widest amount that I need, so I'm not wasting anything. Then I'm going to subcut again. So I'm going to give you a little time-saving tip. Because these dies are mixed media dies, which means they're bigger, deeper, thicker than regular paper crafting dies, it means we can go through multiple layers of this fabric at once. So I need 2 of each of my shapes. So I'm going to go ahead and cut them both at the same time. So I've got one fold here. I'm going to go ahead and fold my fabric again. I'm gonna go ahead and put my cutting mat right underneath there. I'm gonna subcut here, and then I'm gonna line my die up just those edges right over top of the fold. And then I'm gonna put on my plastic shim and my top plate. I can run it through the Gemini. And now I've cut out both sides of my bag at one time. And because I use the dies, they're exactly the same size. Okay, so I need to do exactly the same thing with the liner and the stabilizer. Okay, so now I've got my outer fabric, my stabilizer, and my liner fabric. And I'll just set these aside while I finish cutting. Okay, so the next die we have in the set is for the zip panel, and it's the longer, skinnier, rectangular die. So you're gonna wanna make sure your zip panels measure at least 13 inches. So subcut a piece of fabric about that length, and then line up your die. You can kind of roughly cut it across. Now we can take our base plate and our plastic shim, and then our die face up, and we can lay down our fabric. And you'll notice this die has 4 notches on it. These are the fold notches. I'm laying my die down. I'm gonna lay my fabric down just over top of the cutting edge. And at that end notch, that's gonna be my first fold. And then I'm going to fold it again at the second notch and back again. And then I can add my clear cutting plate. And it doesn't matter which way it goes in the Gemini. With the die facing up or down, it'll work both ways. And there you've got your zip panel. Just make sure that it measures 13 inches by the time it's done. So we're gonna do the exact same thing with the liner fabric. The zip panels do not need any stabilizer. These will lay on either side of my zipper. So I need to cut the same with the lining. Okay, so these are all of the zip panels. Remember, you do not need a zip panel made of the stabilizer. So the next die in the set is this larger rectangular die, and it's gonna be used for the gusset, the side tabs, and the strap. So let's start with the gusset. So for the gusset, you wanna make sure you subcut at least 13 inches of fabric. So I'll lay my die down, and just over the cutting edge, and then at that back folded edge, folding again at that folding notch, and back again at that folding notch. And I can run it through the Gemini. So I've got the gusset made out of the outer fabric, the lining, and my stabilizer. Okay, I'm just gonna set these aside, and I'm gonna cut the side tabs. So the fabric for your side tabs needs to measure 5 inches each, and you need 2 of them. So I'm gonna roughly cut 10.5, 11 inches, because I'm gonna cut both side tabs at the same time. Because these dies are so deep and strong, they can cut multiple layers of the fabric. Save some time. So I'm laying down my die face up on my plastic shim and my clear plastic plate. Then I'm laying down my fabric, and I'm just having it fold over at the first notch, the second notch, and I'm folding it back again. And now I'm gonna run it through the Gemini. And those are my side tabs, but you don't need a liner or a stabilizer for those. I'm also gonna measure out my zipper, just a little past the length of my zip panels, which are 13 inches. Remember, if you're using the zips on a roll, you're gonna zip down all of your other zippers. Leave one zipper in the middle, measure out your length, with the rest of your zips still on the roll. I love zips on a roll. You've always got the right size zipper. So next, using that same die, I'm gonna cut the straps. Now, there's no measurement for the strap. You can make it as long or short as you want. So what I'd suggest doing is taking a measuring tape and running it across your body and wherever feels comfortable. For me, that's about 58 inches. So that's how long I can cut my strap. And if you don't have a long enough piece, then you can just put a seam in the middle and make it longer. So that's what I'm gonna do. And then cut it just like you did the gusset and the zip panels. Okay, with everything cut out, let's just take a little inventory of what we have and get organized. All right, we've got our zipper. We've got our 2 pieces to make the tabs at the side of our bags. That's gonna go with our D-rings. We've got the liner and the outer fabric for the zip panel. Then we've got the gusset in the outer and the inner fabric and the stabilizer. And then we've got our main bag pieces in all 3. So set aside your lining pieces and you can adhere your stabilizer to your outer fabric. Read the instructions when it comes to your stabilizer. If you were using a spray, you might want to touch it with the iron also. Typically you would use a dry iron to adhere stabilizer. And you're probably never gonna find a cute fabric thick and sturdy enough to withstand the weight it needs to for a bag, which is why stabilizers are such a great idea. They're often sort of the unsung hero. The nice pretty outer fabric gets all the credit, but it's really the stabilizer that's doing all the heavy lifting, giving that bag its shape. All right, that's on there. And don't worry if it's a little off, it'll all get hidden in the seam allowance. And now I'm gonna work on my zipper. Okay, this is a bit tricky. However, once you follow these steps, you'll always be able to have an invisible liner in your zipper where you're not seeing the stitches. We're gonna start with the lining fabric, lay it down. We're gonna do this for each side. Zipper, right side up with the edge along the raw edge. And then your outer fabric, right side down along the raw edge. And you can pin or clip this in place, whatever you have, but make sure it stays nice and straight. And then we're gonna sew with the zipper foot straight along here. The zipper foot's gonna let me get nice and close to that actual zipper. That's what we want. When you're sewing and you get to the part where you can feel the zipper, just stop, put your presser foot up, and push the zipper back toward the part you've already sewn, so you don't get a little lump when you're going around the zipper. Okay, when you're done sewing it, open up both sides, and now you can see the liner. There's a clean edge on both sides. So now with my hot iron, I'm gonna just press down that seam on both sides because I want to top stitch this as neatly as possible so no fabric gets in the way of the zipper. Once you've got it pressed, you're gonna top stitch down that entire line. You can lengthen your stitch here a bit if you want. This is the stitch that's gonna show. You could even change up the color. Have a little coordinating thread if you wanted it to look a little more decorative. Remember, when you get to the zipper, stop. So lift up your presser foot, push the zipper down, and keep going. So you have a nice straight line. Super flat, looks very professional if I do say so. So same step as last time, except now we're treating this whole unit like it's the zipper. So liner side, zipper side, raw edges together, and then outer fabric, right side down. And sew. Press them over. All right, looking good. Now let's start with the gusset. I'm gonna treat the gusset and the zipper like they're one unit, one big circle that eventually needs to go around the entire bag. So I'm gonna sew these together at one end first with about a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Okay, so I'm just gonna set this unit aside and I'm gonna start constructing my liner. I'm gonna start with the gusset. I'm just gonna find my center. So fold the gusset bottom. Just finger press so you know where the center is. Same with the one side of your circle, and then with right sides together, you can pin. You're gonna wanna leave about a 1/2 or a 1/4 inch at the end of the gusset. This is to sew the zip panel together, and the other side too. Okay, and sew it together. I'm using about a 1/4 inch seam here. Okay, same with the other side. Find your center, fold it over, and match it up with the center of the other side of the zip liner only. You see, I'm just using the liner here. leaving this part. Right sides together. Okay, so now you've got the liner in place and you can't see any raw edges. That's great. So now we're gonna treat this unit like it's one piece and we're gonna go ahead and construct the exterior, starting with the gusset. And I'm gonna actually go right sides together and I'm gonna measure where the liner gusset ends, and that's where I'm gonna start sewing this one together. So the gusset in my lining is here. Let's go right sides together. And then that way when we open it up, we don't see any messy stitching right here. And then you can flip that over and let's put a little top stitching right down there. Be sure not to catch your liner in the top stitching. See how that just helps it lay nice and flat now? And then I'm just gonna sew the lining to the zip panel, but making sure not to catch the outer fabric. See? Okay, same with the other side. Find your center, fold it over, and match it up with the center of the other side of the zip liner only. You see, I'm just using the liner here, leaving this part. Right sides together. Okay, so now you've got the liner in place and you can't see any raw edges. That's great. So now we're gonna treat this unit like it's one piece and we're gonna go ahead and construct the exterior, starting with the gusset. And I'm gonna actually go right sides together and I'm gonna measure where the liner gusset ends, and that's where I'm gonna start sewing this one together. So the gusset in my lining is here. Let's go right sides together, and that's gonna be where I'm gonna start. I'm gonna sew across. Remember we left that 1/4 inch when we were sewing the gusset of the lining fabric? That's gonna leave us a little bit of space to sew this right sides together. And then that way when we open it up, we don't see any messy stitching right here. And then you can flip that over and let's put a little top stitching right down there. Be sure not to catch your liner in the top stitching. See how that just helps it lay nice and flat now? Okay, we're just gonna do the same on the other side. So right sides together, so flip it up. I'm gonna do the zipper up a bit. Right sides together and sew across where the gusset on the bottom meets it. We're sewing straight across the liner gusset to the zip panel to the outer gusset. It's coming together. All right, let's just top stitch that down. So again, just top stitch that down. Be sure not to catch the liner fabric. So now we've got this sort of shell of a circle with exactly how it's gonna work. And when you open it up, it looks perfectly clean, no raw edges on the inside. Yay! Now, this is where we're gonna add our tabs for our strap because we don't want that to show on the inside either. So let's add them now while we've still got access to both sides of the outer fabric. So we're gonna take our tab panels, we've got 2, fold them in half, right sides together, and then just do a straight stitch up, and then we'll turn them right side out. So if it's too narrow, you can always use a safety pin or a clip or something big that you can get a hold of and shove it down the middle. Once you've got your tabs turned right side out, press them. Everything sews better when it's been flattened. I'm gonna add the D-ring, folding in the edges onto my bag. Make sure it's facing up. Now, this is a pressure point of the bag, so reinforce it with some extra stitching. Looks good. Okay, I'm gonna do the other side. Trim the ends, fold them in, add the ring, fold the edges in, bring them together, and add that to the other side of my bag. Now, if you want, you could also hide these tabs inside your seam between your gusset and your zipper. Totally up to you. So now this is where we're going to sew all the way around. We're gonna take the zip panel, pick a spot, and start pinning. Okay, now that I've got it clipped all the way around the one side, I'm gonna start sewing. Now take this slow. You're going through a lot of fabric and you're going in a circle. All right, once that side's on, turn it around. Now we're gonna do the same with the other side. Right sides together, you're clipping it together like this. Be sure not to catch the liner. Now you'll have to turn the bag in on itself to get all the way around. I find clips work better for a job like this, Because this is so strong with this stabilizer, our pins would probably get bent. And if you find that you've got some pleats, push your center down a little bit so that you don't get any pleats. Now we're gonna sew our way around. So remember we left the space to turn it right side out? That's why. Turn it right side out. Okay, kind of an important step. I know you're anxious to see it, but do a little spot check and make sure there's no holes somewhere you might have inadvertently missed sewing over, because it can easily happen. So there's no holes. Now you can turn it right side out. Now we want this to be as circular as possible. So really press it out with your fingers. And now we just need to close that hole in the liner once you're happy with how it's looking on the outside. So now we just need to close the liner. It naturally is sort of folding that way anyway. So just bring those ends together and just give it a stitch across. This will feel pretty easy compared to what you've just done. Okay, shove it on in. Okay, now just flatten out your seam. I'm just gonna use a pressing cloth over top of the faux leather so it doesn't melt by the iron. And then I'm just gonna top stitch on both sides. Okay, so we can attach it to our bag. Make sure the side with the seam is facing the back. Loop it through and just sew it in place. Make sure nothing gets twisted. Ha, caught a twist. It happens. Just going on the hunt for any loose threads. It's gonna look so cute. I could totally picture buying this in a little boutique style store. And it's amazing that we made it ourselves. And then you know all the different components will totally fit together thanks to the dies from Gemini.